Well, I think we can get started today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I know we've got people joining from all over the world. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar on what we at Plan It Together feel are the top 5 tips to consider when choosing planning and scheduling software. So a little background before we get started. Plan It Together is a software company that focuses on advanced planning and scheduling, and that's all we do. We're committed to improving operations on a global basis and basically want to share our experience and knowledge from about the last 10 years or so with you. So, some introductions today. My name's Ryan McMartin, and I'll be your moderator. And we have 2 presenters. Our first will be Scott McMartin, and he'll be presenting from an executive perspective. He's been a senior level sales executive for almost 30 years and has a lot of experience implementing APS systems with the goal of improving communications between sales and operations. Also presenting today will be Kenta Tamura. He'll be presenting from the operations perspective. Kenta is a solutions engineer here at Plan It Together and has been responsible for our larger, more complex implementations. So, what's on the agenda today? For the first 40-45 minutes, we'll be just going through the 5 tips that we've come up for you, which are make a business case, define desired outcomes and critical success factors, challenging software features, align your initiatives, and choosing the best process. Now, during our 45-minute period here, feel free to use the help or question area of GoToWebinar to type in any questions that you may have. And if we have time during the presentation, we'll answer it. And if we don't have time, we'll make room for it at the end when we're going to have a 10 to 15 minute Q&A. During the 10 to 15 minute Q&A, feel free to use the hand raising feature. That way I can unmute you and you can ask your question live and we can get you some answers. And of course, if you think of something after the webinar, you can always contact us later on, and we will provide some contact information at the end. So with respect to your time, let's get started, and I'll pass it off to Scott, and he can explain why you need a business case. Scott?
The fundamentals of the business case are, what's the area of improvement that we're trying to address? What's the degree of improvement that we're going to try to impart? And what's the metric by which we will determine if the improvement has been reached or we've been successful with the initiative? Just let me give you a quick example. A couple of years ago, our largest current customer, a global multi-plant packaging company, was anticipating a significant challenge to their operating profits in the upcoming, what they perceived to be difficult year. It was the edict of the business operations team that the APS project had to deliver a very specific improvement in the company's key performance metric. In their particular case, that was the cost per 1,000 square feet of product produced. Further, the CFO, who was very skeptical of the true value of any software, and I find that more and more today. A lot of people are just sort of, really in disbelief that software is going to drive any kind of value, and even ROIs are something that they don't put a lot of stock in these days. It's too bad, because I think if they're done properly, they really do help people to understand, what the potential impact is going to be. But anyway, he was not very, confident about software being able to deliver any real value, but he stated that until the solution demonstrated the expected results were attainable, no capital budget would be approved. A little later, I'm going to get into kind of the parameters of that particular situation so you can get a better feel for how agile and how focused even a big company of their size was able to be throughout the process of evaluating and implementing because of the evaluation process that they embarked upon. Okay, next, it's really critical to be clear about cause and effect. That is, what's the difference between an outcome and what is necessary to bring the outcome about? If we're in agreement that the purpose of any business is to acquire, retain, and grow customers at a profit, then it is appropriate to assess our situation regarding lost new business opportunities, lost customers, profitability, and the general nature of day-to-day world we live in. as a former VP of sales for a couple of manufacturing companies myself, I was always very interested in the potential for lost customers as well as any lost new business opportunity that we experienced. Generally stating, APS systems are designed to improve delivery performance and profit performance. So if we are experiencing a loss of customers or a threat to a lost customer, or we are experiencing difficulty competing in the marketplace, delivery performance is really the causal issue. So it's very critical that we understand, what we're trying to achieve in the area of, delivery performance, both on time and lead time. So that would be critical success factors that lead to improving our ability to retain our customers and to acquire new ones. Thinning margins are typically also a symptom that is caused by unusually high operating expenses associated with the fourth item you see on the chart here, the issue of poor visibility, where most companies are reactive, they're firefighting, and as a result of that, overtime is much higher than it should be. Expedited freight is elevated. Outsourced operations because there's a perception that there is a lack of capacity. So those are sort of the critical success factors that I would say are most common. But understanding which is the cause and which is the effect, and then ultimately, being able to connect those dots clearly with the software, and Kenta will get into that in a few minutes. But the key to maintaining a focused environment improvement effort is to understand the relative impact of improvement in each critical area. Let's face it, we all have limited resources as well as time to make a difference. It makes sense that we try to impact the area we can affect the quickest, that has the greatest company-wide impact. Delivery performance and pricing improvement will yield relatively near-term top-line revenue and margin impact. And the good news about sales-oriented or profit improvement-oriented initiatives is that they really don't have a limit, which is opposed to the area of focus of operating expenses. Cost reduction exercises are ongoing. It's just a fact of life. But operating expense reduction is also relatively quick to realize, but generally not as significant in absolute terms. And then, the longer range planning tools that are available in most APS systems represent a more strategic impact. So I guess the point here is take a look at where we can make the biggest impact the soonest, and really start to focus on those capabilities within the solution being offered to address those relatively near-term opportunities for improvement. At this point, dealing with tips 3 and 4, I'd like to turn over to my colleague Kenta Tamura.
Thank you, Scott. So when we're talking about selecting the software that's right for you, a planning and scheduling software that really does what you need, but we want to make sure that the features that are shown to you or what you think you want to understand and make sure that they truly do support the critical success factors that's your burning platform. What you truly want to avoid are those gotchas where you have a one understanding of the feature or the features as shown in a particular demo, for example, and find out that they in fact don't support your not only your critical success factors, but also ultimately your planning and scheduling workflow. So those missed nuances can make a huge difference in a way that adds more firefighting, rather than empowering you or giving you a tool that makes you more productive, that allows you to create a plan or a schedule that's more effective and so forth. So, what I like to do now is to go over, 3 typical examples that typically have, a fuzzy meaning, that want to really be careful or want to have a clear picture of what you want. And those are going to be, a drag and drop, a multi-user. These two really help you to bring about visibility within the schedule. And an optimization, a automated scheduling logic that helps you drive the planning and scheduling generation process. So, one example is drag and drop. Every scheduling software obviously claims to have equipped with an intuitively way of of moving a particular order from one machine to another, or on the same machine from one day to another, and so forth. Now, what many don't delve into, is this idea of will there be a validation check? So if I'm moving from one machine to another, how do I know it is in fact the right machine that I can move to, and not ones that cannot actually be able to produce that order? Another example is if I move a subcomponent order to a later date, is that going to actually impact and ripple affect the assembly order in a way that's actually going to move it further out, so as to avoid situations where I got an assembly order due on Tuesday, but I actually moved the subcomponent order to Thursday. But if I have the order still sitting there on Tuesday for assembly order, um, what's going to actually happen on the shop floor is come Tuesday, production goes out and looks for a part and it's not actually there because the system didn't do any sort of the validation check and actually moved the order out. Another, similar example is what you're seeing on the screen here, where an order consists of 3 routing steps. If I move the first step A to a later date, I obviously would want the later steps B and C to kind of follow along and schedule at a later date. And I would want the system to do that for me rather than having to do validation check on my own by moving the B and C steps along the way, because what it'll actually result in is this risk of putting out an unrealistic schedule to the shop floor. And to avoid that, I actually have to double or triple my work, not just moving A, but also moving B and C. And so, at this point, I would sort of be asking myself, well, I thought I purchased this software as planning scheduling software so that I could be more productive, not add more, work on my plate. So if you kind of, imagine using a word processor where it doesn't come with a spell check. So you have to go in every time, you're kind of in the constant fear that you might be spelling the wrong word, and I have to do a double check, a triple check to make sure you're doing not just being efficient, but also just doing the bare minimum of creating something that's correct. So now, this is a very simple example, but if you can kind of imagine a real-world environment, and the problem becomes more evident. If you're dealing with in a larger production environment, more machines, more production orders, and so forth. Just having to manage all this manually. You want that to be, you want to be as effective and in practical as you can be. And last thing you want is more time spent just doing, reality checking, so to speak. You want the system to assist you, not add more work for you. And so, we, drag and drop is a simple term, but we want to be mindful of the fine details and the nuances, and what does it actually offer you? Does it, can it do all these validation checks for you? Does it give you the sort of the ripple effect, so to speak, moving one order and showing you the impact on the others? um, is it just moving one order at a time, or do I have the ability to select multiple orders and move to a different location and so forth? So, does it truly work in a way that empowers me, or does it add more time and more firefighting for me? So another example is this idea of multi-user environment. So when we talk about a multi-user environment, the question really want to be asking is, what sort of visibility does it not only would I get, but also for the whole team? An example here is where there's an order consisting of multiple steps spanning across multiple plants. So we want to see an impact of moving the work in one location on the subsequent step on a different plant. And so we want that information to be as real time as possible, so that the whole team is in sync, having the same visibility, and on the same page as what's going on, across the organization. Does it, so that the whole thing is a truly collaborative manner, across department, across users, across plants and ultimately across continents, especially if you're in a very large, production environment. So that these sort of gaps, if it's not real time, then obviously there's a risk that there's going to be this gap of what I see, what you see, and what the others see. And we talk about multi-user. That's another example of is it as real time as it can be, is it as collaborative as it could be, or is it not so? Many scheduling platforms also come with, this idea of an automated scheduling engine. So you press, you have your pre-configured rules, you press the button, and the system will generate a schedule that you can start out with, and you make adjustments as necessary. Now, the question you want to be asking is, can that engine be configured in a way that's beyond one-dimensional? What I mean by that is, one-dimensional example would be, merely scheduling by due date only. Not a problem in itself per se, but in real life, you have multiple rules you want to go by, where you want to balance between a ship date, customer due date, but also the need to minimize setup time and so forth. Maybe each order has a different priority level, so you want to take all those things into account. And maybe change the priority level between those two, among those rules, and create a maintained schedule that way. So that's be an example of one-dimensional versus multi-dimensional. Another example, or actually going beyond that, those would be more on the tactical side of things. Now we want to actually, what if you want to go more strategic? The need to maximize your throughput while balancing your inventory costs and so forth. In addition, as that strategy change, going from one set of metrics to another, can those rules be easily configured and also assessed using key performance indicators and so forth? Or are you stuck with a pre-configured set that's going to either be impossible to change or cost additional effort in one way or the other? Ideally, we want a system that's capable of supporting your tactical as well as your strategic needs, and be able to support the changes in the future to support your business growth. And so, part of that is, the organization may be going through, different business initiatives, and so the optimization, you want to be able to support those, initiatives as they come and go and so forth. And I'm going to hand the baton back to Scott, so that he can discuss about how the system can or should be able to support the various initiatives taking place.
Thanks, Kenta. Yeah, it's not uncommon when we start to go down the path of evaluating our software with prospects of ours, that there are several initiatives within the companies that we're engaged with. I think virtually every company that I've ever worked for, and probably all of you that are on the call today, probably have an event every year where you do some strategic planning, and out of those come strategic initiatives. Those strategic initiatives are effectively what the company's management is saying are where the resources are going to go, because they're critically important to the success of the business. A lot of times what happens is, they start to take priority in and of themselves over the other initiatives. They're all competing for the same limited resource. So, with all the potential distractions, threatening our ability to achieve the mission, it is paramount that any proposed project is aligned with the stated company goals, at least what they are for this year, and maybe there's some multi-year initiatives. And here are a few of the common ones. Changing the ERP system. That's becoming a little bit more common right now, because we've gotten into an economic climate where making that kind of a capital investment's a little bit easier to justify. Supply-based initiatives are always big. There's always some kind of continuous improvement initiative, lean, Six Sigma, something that's kind of oriented around that kind of thing. New market initiatives. I was with a couple of companies where every year there was always some new market initiative, and guess what? new markets sometimes require new fulfillment strategies, new ways of allocating resources to fulfill the needs of those customers. And then data cleanup is always a big one, right? So everybody's had ERP systems in place for years and years and years, but whenever we get close to getting started, the big fear is, oh my God, the data's not right. So, as far as that goes, we would say data availability is probably more important than data purity. So, the key here that I'm trying to emphasize is that an advanced planning and scheduling project can actually be the enabler or the catalyst of any of the other initiatives that are identified as being important to the company at any particular time. A lot of times what we'll ask is, are there any initiatives that are stalled for any reason? Because we feel that, at least with regard to these 5, that we can have a tremendous catalytic impact on the success of those initiatives, especially if there's a timeline that they have to be completed within. All right. So I was heartened to find out that in this month's copy of Apex magazine, there was a study performed regarding what were the areas of focus for supply chain executives for the coming year. Literally every one of these areas of focus is an area that can be affected by an APS implementation. The implementation itself, even before the software is actually implemented, can actually have an impact on any one of these 10 issues. Reducing cost, absolutely. As I pointed out in my case study, trying to reduce cost per 1,000 square feet of product was the initiative at that company. Improving sales and operations planning. I think, as Kenta just showed you, the collaborative capability of some software makes it real easy for the sales and operations teams to start to take a look at not only the longer term plan, but even the day-to-day or week-to-week schedule adjustments that have to get made. This really helps everybody get on the same page. Inventory management usually is a byproduct of a good execution system. Customer service, all can be helped. Customer service initiatives are pretty common. Some people would say if you've got a lot of customer service people, you've got a problem with your fulfillment system. We would say customer service people are generally, pretty sharp. They understand the production environment pretty well and could be using things like capable to promise to really, compress the whole negotiation issue with customers relative to due dates. And they set the production department up with realistic dates that can be achieved. Collaboration we just talked about, not only within the company, but even within the supply base. There are ways in which planning and scheduling software can be deployed to provide visibility into suppliers' production capacity. Supply chain visibility generally, tactics and strategy, so the long-range planning versus the day-to-day production scheduling. Supply chain complexity. This is an area that's actually not that prevalent in terms of functional capability of most products, but the idea of plants operating as a virtual plant, or what we would call a super plant, where multiple plants operate with interdependency, is a scenario of complexity that can be addressed by APS software. Risk management, absolutely. Everything you can improve is going to reduce the risk of the company not being able to fulfill its business mission. And synchronization, at a minimum, it's tied back to this inventory issue. If I can synchronize the flow of material through the constrained resources of the company, that's going to have a positive impact on overall inventory position. So the fact that this article just came out this month was really timely, because it really starts to show you that the areas that most people are concerned about are all affected by being able to plan and schedule properly. So we're really excited about what 2015 is going to yield for us. But any of you who are feeling challenged that there are too many initiatives to really get anything else off the ground, I would position APS initiative as a catalyst to the others. So I was a little long-winded there, but I just thought it was so timely that I wanted to at least make this available to you. Okay, now where the rubber really hits the road here is, how do you go about this? We've talked about the things that you need to do as a prerequisite. Understand what the goal is, understand how you're measuring it, understand cause and effect, But then at the end of the day, you got to get down to, figuring out what the heck you're going to do. So I've been in the software business for 30 years, and the traditional evaluation approach, typically characterized by an RFP, has not changed in the 30 years that I've been, in the software business, or even working as a sales executive in a manufacturing business. The problem with that is, in today's environment, is it's too darn long. It wastes too much time. Generally they're requirements rather than outcomes focused. Like I said earlier, everybody tells us what their requirements are. They very rarely tell us what the outcomes are that they're expecting. What's success going to look like 6 months from now? They take too long, effectively perpetuating the cost of the status quo. If a company realizes that it has a problem big enough to start creating an initiative to go select and evaluate and implement a piece of software to address the problem, it's likely that even for the smaller companies, that the implications of that are worth tens of thousands of dollars a month. They never really make the cause and effect connection. Again, I got all kinds of requirements. I just don't understand what doing something that particular way is going to do for the company relative to its goals. And essentially, because of the 3 points I just articulated, they all become very high risk in terms of ever completing and actually delivering the results that everybody hopes for. The best approach, we feel, especially over the last several years where time is so crucial, the best approach is one that helps to get right to the rubber meets the road issues threatening the business now, and makes it easy to get started, is focused on measurable results, and minimizes financial and operational risk. The two variations of this really are a pilot, or a proof of vision, proof of concept you may have heard. This is essentially a short-term billable project designed to prove the specific functionality or capability necessary to drive the expected result actually works as envisioned. Little examples of that Kenta just gave you about, how does drag and drop really work? How does multi-user really work? How does multi-plant actually work? How does optimization really work? These efforts rarely run longer than 4 months. They're generally pretty compact. Generally, we see them being even as short as a couple of months, but no more than 4 months. To give you an example, or to further the example I started to talk about earlier, that customer of ours is a $4 billion 50-plant worldwide operation with multiple divisions using different ERP systems. And in their case, because of the edict by the CFO about being able to show results before they would actually greenlight the project, a decision was made to use a proof of vision evaluation approach, resulting in a 4-month project that implemented 4 plants as a baseline. The reason they liked the proof of vision is that they could use operating expense funds, operating budget funds, to actually figure out if they could actually achieve the goals that they were looking for before they went for the capital request. After the 4 plants were implemented, and that was about 4 months, which, to be honest with you, that's a pretty compressed timeline to implement 4 plants of a big company the way that was done. And we have Kenta to thank for that. He managed that project and did a great job. But the customer data was then that compared the costs of the schedules generated with the APS system to the schedules generated by the very competent planner scheduler team, was collected and analyzed for 6 weeks. The improvement in the cost for 1,000 square feet of product was documented to be more than twice the expected results. Guess what? The project was green-lighted almost immediately. The CFO was absolutely thrilled, and actually the team went to him and said, "Hey, look, we think we can get about a 7% improvement instead of the 3% we'd originally talked about, but we're gonna make a commitment that we'll deliver the 3% we told you about in the first place." So with that kind of executive commitment to the CFO, it was immediately approved. With the 4-plant working system as a base, the next 26 plants in the division were rolled out and live before the end of the year. So in a period of 11 months, essentially, 30 plants were implemented and getting benefit from an APS project And that's that's in a huge company, but extremely agile. I mean, these people are so focused on results, it's scary. But that's what you have to be these days. As an aside, they also had another division that had 15 plants that was trying to implement ERP and APS simultaneously. This could be another sort of a less obvious tip. But their initiatives started at the same time. By the end of that year, 30 plants in one division were implemented with a working APS system that was delivering results. The one plant that was implementing the ERP system simultaneously with planning and scheduling was not live with either solution, and ultimately the division got sold. So in the course of a year, one company implemented 30 times, the other part of the company didn't implement once. So, and that goes to show you that a focused effort oriented around specific results is going to win every time. The other option, other than the proof of concept, is the trial. A little bit different, but we think this is also a good approach. It's really more or less an extended custom demo. This usually takes, 30 to 60 days, and it basically enables the free use of the APS software. It's supported by a very limited scope of consulting effort, usually training, just to make sure that people who are going to try to play with the system a little bit have a working knowledge of how to navigate through it and how the data is set up. But the key here is to get the client's data into the system and to start showing schedules that make some sense to them and provide them some visibility right away without being perfect or without being anything that's really going to be, implemented per se, in that 30 to 60 day period. But it gives the client a very good feel for whether or not the out-of-box capability can be used in the environment, and it does it with the client's data. So, regardless of which approach is used, the objective is to immediately start addressing the actual challenges currently contributing or anticipated to contribute to adverse conditions in the business. By using either the pilot or the trial, the prospect is able to drastically compress the time to benefit, reduce the risk of failure, and maximize the return on investment. Now, one other thing I should say is we get asked a lot by clients, well, what about references? Do you have references? We have plenty of references, and most companies do, but I would say the best reference is you. If you can work with a supplier to provide, use of the software or some kind of scoped implementation of the software without a huge financial investment, you're certainly going to minimize risk. But there is no other company that could be a reference that has exactly your dynamics that's in your industry even. There's a lot of differences there. So our recommendation really would be your own reference. Get started fixing the problems. Don't wait around. In today's extremely competitive and uncertain environment, time, money, and human resources are in short supply, and engaging qualified solution providers to immediately work on the real problems, which means you have to have them defined pretty well, is far and away better than conceptual approaches to poorly defined needs. So, I could go on and on about this, but we think a more collaborative, more of an implementation orientation to the evaluation process is really where the key is to being successful. All right. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Ryan.
Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you, Kenta. These are great tips, really great stories about how to be successful. And I'd like to just review what we've learned in one slide while people, if anyone's online here that would like to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand, and we can open it up. We do have a couple questions that we'll get to at the end, but let's quickly summarize what the tips were. So number one was make a business case. Know why you are evaluating planning software in terms of business impact. Number two was define the desired outcomes and critical success factors. Quantify the expected results and the means of achieving them. Number three, challenge the software features. Understand how exactly the software will drive the results. Ask questions. Don't be caught off guard. Number four, align with your initiatives. Avoid distraction and competition for resources by competing initiatives. Very important. And number 5, choose the best process. Get to the business of impacting your business in a low risk, high value way. Don't waste time or energy on non-value add approaches. So with that said, I'm going to flip to the end slide here with some contact information. We'll open it up for some Q&A. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand. You'll see Scott and Kenta's email address and contact information. If you have any questions afterward, please feel free to email them, or just you can email info@planettogether.com and ask your question that way. And so let's see, I've got a couple questions here. I think possibly Kenta, you might be able to answer this one, but it says, what are the advantages and challenges of having higher level KPIs for optimization? I guess rather than just basic due dates, and what are some challenges?
Sure. So, I think the challenge is always is that, going from tactical mindset to strategic mindset, planners and schedulers always, they think in details. So they look at, each order's due date, sequencing from the earliest to the latest and so forth. I also look at, things like, grouping things by particular product grouping and so forth, and that's all fine. Now, they're always actually indirectly also thinking in terms of their, uh, business goal, but they're not quite there yet. So having actually high level business metric and mindset helps the whole team, be in alignment with ultimately where they need to go. So I think it really helps with the transition from the tactical mindset to a strategic mindset. Without it, it's hard to foster that paradigm shift or the change in mindset, thinking in terms of, these tactical metrics to a strategic mindset.
Yeah, if I could add something there, the idea that you're going to be moving from a firefighting environment to a proactive environment gives you the opportunity to really do some analytics on what's really going on in the schedule and in the plans. A lot of companies that start to look at APS solutions see it as a tool, something that's just basically better than a spreadsheet that they have that they just can't get the job done with. We would suggest that this is not just a tool. It is a competitive advantage, and if you implement it, the way we would advocate, it's an unfair competitive advantage, because I'll tell you right now, I think there's only about 5% of manufacturers actually have implemented these kinds of tools. So if you're looking to gain a competitive edge and take market share from people because you can deliver faster, you can deliver more reliably, and you can deliver in a very profitable way that allows you to earn your cost of capital, you're going to be viable for a long, long time.
All right, thanks, guys. We've got one more question in queue here. So maybe Scott, if you can take this one. It is, what if company policy or consultants are dictating a more traditional approach to implementation? And then it says, example, RFP.
Yeah, I think that's likely to happen. I know that recently we've had a couple of situations where initiatives were just getting underway, and then a consultant ends up being engaged by executive management to help make decisions and assess platforms and all that kind of thing. Typically, decisions that get made generally are driven by requests for proposals, RFPs. In the 30 years that I've been really in this business space, I've rarely seen an RFP that actually captures what the company's trying to accomplish. It has, like I said earlier, it's got a lot of requirements in it, but it doesn't really connect the dots between these requirements are going to help us achieve this specific objective. So I would say that I would try to include, if it's going to have to go to an RFP, then try to get included in the RFP to help your potential provider provide the best solution. Make sure there's a connection between the requirements you think you need and the goals you're trying to achieve, and give the supplier the latitude to provide solutions that are more oriented around the results than they are around the specific functionality. I mean, they have to basically make the case that the functionality is maybe not the best approach, and they'd have to offer something else. But that's what I would say, and I would say that the operations team and combined with the sales folks in some cases, really understands what's going on the floor and really should be able to articulate what they need. So, to go through an RFP process itself is probably going to take you 6 months. I know everyone I've ever received said they're going to make a decision in 3 months. Never happens. It's always going to be at least 6 months. So if it's costing you $50,000 a month to perpetuate the status quo, and it's going to be 6 months, that's what, $300,000 of lost opportunity to go through a process that's really more of an administrative thing. I'd rather get a team together that understands what the heck's going on, understands what the challenges are, and how it's impacting the business from a customer perspective, and the associated lost, revenue or profit, and attack the problem that way. And let me just give you one last story. About 10 years ago, I walked into a Dana plant in Connecticut. I happened to walk into the plant the day that the division vice president was in basically having a very intense meeting with the plant management regarding the fact that they had lost Napa as a customer after 6 months of Napa telling them they could not, that their delivery performance was inadequate. So they lost a $4 million account. I don't know what the margin on that business was. Maybe it was 30%. So let's say it's $1 million of profit that they lost because they couldn't deliver on time, and they had 6 months of warning about it, and they still couldn't fix it. We tried to offer a very fast-paced approach to addressing the problem, and we were kind of shut down at that time. Within 6 months, they were sold to GKN, that plant and 6 others. So one of the jobs of a CFO is to continually analyze: do I reinvest? Do I invest? Do I restructure? Or do I divest? Those 3 questions are being asked every day about every business entity within the group. And it really would behoove you all, if they're looking for APS systems, to really understand how they can help the company achieve its objectives. So I would say that an RFP process, at best, is really just documenting the process. At worst, it's actually perpetuating a very serious state of the business that could ultimately put you out of business if you don't act fast enough. So, I think that the approaches that we talked about, the trial and the proof of concept, are actually the best ways to start attacking the problem in a very risk-managed way, and will ensure that you're successful ultimately once the decision is made.
All right, well, thanks, Scott. That's a great answer. I don't see any more questions from the audience, so I think we'll start to wrap up here. But again, feel free to contact us through email or call us, and we'll be happy to answer any of your planning questions. We love talking about this stuff, so give us a call. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today, and hope you found today's session helpful and worth your while. And we will be posting this recording on our website later on today. So everyone, have a good day. Thanks a lot.